Let's talk a little bit more about your career. Who has had the most significant influence on your career and why?
Undoubtedly, Mr. David Finn. He is 89 years old. He started the company with his friend Bill Reuter in 1948, so it's 62 years ago. And in the early 50s, he started an ethics committee at the firm. So he has been at the center and the soul of the company's concern about doing the right thing. So he's been a mentor, he's been an example. I'm still today surprised. He still is able to surprise me in the way he reacts to events and incidents that happen at the firm.
Can you give us an example of that?
I'll give you a great story. We had hired a journalist who used to work for PR Week, a magazine, and then had gone to another PR firm, had left the magazine and went to another PR firm, and then was laid off. So he was looking for a job, and he was a good writer, and we had a good connection. So we hired him. And his role was to be a writer for the agency. Journalists are usually good writers, and he was a good writer. Mm-hmm. But things were not going very well. Either he was not looking hard enough for a job, for work, or people didn't trust him. We're not sure. But we felt responsible. We hired him. It was not really his fault. So we kept him on. And then one day he came to see my boss. I was not in that day, about something. And then at the end he said, "Oh, by the way, you'll see something in the media tomorrow, but don't worry, it's nothing." Next morning, front page of Old Wires, which is another PR publication. Reuter Finn's Dobros, his name was Larry Dobro, settled with the SEC for insiders trading. They settled, so it was alleged that while he was at the other agency, he was working on a small bank that was going to be acquired by Wells Fargo. Called his father. "Hey, Dad." His father said, "Thank you, son." Went to the bank, opened a separate account, bought the stock of that small bank, and when the merger was announced, the stock price went up, and then he sold it. He aligned all the red flags for the SEC to find him. So the question was, what do we do? Ethics often starts with, what should we do? What should I do? So we had a meeting of the executive committee and went around the table, and the reactions were, he has to go. Reuter Finn is dedicated and takes ethics seriously. We can't have someone among our staff that did this. Others said, "I don't trust him. If he did that, maybe we should close our door when he's around." And then came David's turn. And he said no. He said, number one, it's not right to let someone go because it makes you look better. Number two, he said Larry's under a lot of stress because of what happened, the media, the legal fees. It wouldn't be right to take his job away from him now and add an extra burden. And number three, and this is what surprised me the most, he said, what about the concept of forgiveness? So I thought, wow, you're chairman of a large company that has over 500 employees and millions in billing, and you talk about the concept of forgiveness.
Let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about counseling and a counseling role, transition a little bit from mentoring. The aim of the Arthur W. Page Center and the Arthur Page Society is to help individuals become counselors to leadership. So how can individuals best prepare themselves for this role, best prepare themselves to be counselors to leaders in public relations?
Well, I think you have to put yourself in the person you're going to counsel's feet, or shoes actually, and think what keeps him or her awake at night, what are the issues, what's the past, what's the history, what are the challenges, on the one hand. On the other hand, you have to be courageous. You can't be someone, if you're going to speak to the CEO, that's going to tell him what he wants to hear. And we've seen this in the political world, of people surrounding themselves with advisors that praise that person and tell him he's right, and then people with courage and integrity that will say things as they see them.
So how can individuals prepare themselves to be counselors? What are some of the things that they can do to be prepared to be a good counselor to leadership?
You mean in reading, or in what kind of
Preparation as far as that, education, maybe even going back to some mentoring.
Maybe some psychology can help,
Mm-hmm.
studying psychology, because that helps in the interaction and the understanding of the other. I think that could be helpful. I think you need a dose of humility, because you can be wrong. You can be both forceful and humble at the same time. When you forceful when you know for sure, but we rarely know for sure. And you have to make sure that you always consider the person you're counseling's best interest at all times, and not yours.
And you talked a little bit about this earlier. Is it important for a corporation to have an ethical mission statement or credo, and why?
I think it's important, but it's not enough. Mission statements most of the time are bland and too general and not taken seriously. What is important is if you walk the talk. What's important is if the message comes from the tone and the message comes from the top. And what is important is if it's real, and if you can show that it's real by the actions the company or the person has taken, not just a general principle of goodwill. So I usually don't take a mission statement too seriously. It's necessary because you need a reference. You need to go back at one point and say, hey, this is our mission statement, this is contrary to the mission. That's an important tool, but it's not enough.